Salve, people of the universe, my name is Lord Salvator, and today we're going to be talking about what happened in Amsterdam. Now, I am Dutch, I'm from the Netherlands. Amsterdam is our sort of capital, almost. Um, and basically, what you've probably heard is that there was a clash between pro-Palestinians and Jewish Maccabi, the Tel Aviv football club supporters, and the pro-Palestinians were also partially people from the Ajax group, um, which is a Dutch Amsterdam football club, basically. Um, but I do think it's fair that we deconstruct what actually happened, how this happened, why it happened, and not just instantly blame all the Muslims just like that. Because uh, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know I'm not a big fan of the Muslim ideology or religion, and you know that we do want to get rid of those um, aspects of Islam from European society that are more violent towards women and more violent towards uh, children, things like that. Um, but I do think we need to deconstruct it to get the real truth here. Now, when I first heard it, the main thing I saw was people relating it to a pogrom. Now, if you don't know what a pogrom is, it's what happened in Amsterdam before, in especially in the 1930s, 1940s, because that's when, of course, Adolf Hitler, the Austrian painter that became a politician in Germany, rose to power, took over the Netherlands, and they just started to annihilate the Jews, basically. They started to just beat the crap out of them on what was called Kristallnacht. Um, and it's there's very popular people from Amsterdam from the period, which, for example, is Anne Frank. She's very popular in history. But history is history. Let's go to what actually happened. Well, not really today, but in the present times. What actually happened is that backdrop. Okay, backdrop. Like I said, Maccabi, which is a Tel Aviv, which is in Israel, football club, came to play against a Dutch football club. Our government currently is run by Geert Wilders and his party, the PVV, Partij voor de Vrijheid, also known as the Party for Freedom. And he's been known to be more right-wing compared to other politicians. Some people say he's extreme right, but that's not entirely true, because he's very leftist when it comes to his economic policies, for example. But he does want to get rid of the overflow of immigrants, which is fair, because even the immigrants didn't have enough room to be here. And we are running out of houses too, so we don't really have the capacity to have a lot of immigrants. Also, the violence that is very common in Islam, especially Islam that's imported from these countries. Because what you see is that these people have a hard time adjusting, and they have a hard time adjusting to people, for example, like they will be violent towards women or children. And they do that because it's normal for them. And of course, we don't like that. So these people often do get arrested, or, well, they would be if we didn't have a shortage of jail cells. And this kind of comes back to the problem that we're dealing with, is that Wilders has called for a lot of the Islam, like the Palestinian supporters, to be arrested because they're supporting a terrorist idea. Because I know what you might say. You might say, but Palestine isn't a terrorist idea, but it is. And I'm going to explain to you exactly why. Right? So before you tell me I'm wrong, please listen to my argument here. Palestine was first called out by someone from the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a terrorist organization from Egypt. Right? And they just kind of took the Jordanian flag and changed it up a bit. There was never really a Palestinian state in history. And if you want to see more on that argument, I'll link a video in the description where you can see more about what I have to say about that. But Okay, so with that out of the way, right, that sets the scene, right? So with a lot of political divide in my country, with some people being pro-Palestinian, some people being pro-Israel, um, you kind of see that the war is being imported over here. And so what happens when you get people from a war zone to be in the midst of that whilst also being in such a terrible sport as football, right? And with football, I don't mean the American kind, I mean soccer, okay? Just want to clarify that. But I'm not going to change my wording for Americans because they have bad choices always. Uh, yeah. But the firm idea that is basically clear in this is that you're kind of creating a mixture, and I've always compared cultures the same way. Sure, the cultures just don't mix together. The same way Islam doesn't go with atheism, Christianity, Judaism. You can't just put a bunch of war people with a bunch of people who don't agree with those war people, right? That's just looking for conflict. And then when you have such a violent sport as football, where people are just hooligans, it's what football is for, right? Football is basically the replacement for the hunt. It's the replacement for that adrenaline shot that people have. This is why I think people should be doing fight sports more rather than just going to watch people do football or whatever, right? There's better ways to be exciting that are more regulated. So that's also like one of the things that's in my Democratic Manifesto. It's also talking about changing the way that sports are being done. It's changing about the way that all that stuff is. Public, you could still be publicly together. I forgot what the word for that is for a moment. But you can still come together, but just not in like super large groups and then go on to make a ruckus, basically. That's not allowed in the democratic states. So, the point that I'm trying to make is, though, this is where it happened. So now let's get back to the night that we were actually talking about. So the nights before the actual incident where the Jews were attacked, there were both Maccabi supporters and Palestinian supporters already riling each other up. And one of the incidents that has been mentioned is that an Israeli person beat up a taxi driver. And taxi drivers were already mad because of that. And the reason why he beat up a taxi driver is because they had a Palestinian flag. Now you have to understand, to Israel, a Palestinian flag is just as bad as a Nazi flag, right? To them it's just as bad. It shows the same violence. And I can understand that. I get angry when I see a Palestinian flag as well. I don't go around beating people up yet because, well, it doesn't really achieve anything. But when you're in like such a state and you're not at your home and you just see that and you've been in a war zone for a long time, or you've been in a country at war for a while, you don't think that way. You just think enemy, enemy, enemy. And that's a very understandable way of thinking. It's just psychology. But this kind of made things crystallize. And what ended up happening is that the riling up between two parties became worse and worse. But then eventually, what happened on the night of the incident itself is that a bunch of pro-Palestinians, they actually made a plan of attack against the Israelis. So like, whilst the Israelis did more of a just in the moment thing, this was actually a coordinated attack against the Israelis. And this is kind of what separates the two instances, right? So both did some things wrong, but the pro-Palestinians were worse because they actually planned it. They planned to do this. They made a plan to go and hunt for Jews, basically. Not just Maccabi supporters, but it's really bad. Because what you can tell is that there's this sort of the media paints the picture that either it's just the Jews that are the victim, or that the pro-Palestinians are the actual victims. But when you look at it, it's the pro-Palestinians aren't really the victims. It's just that a few of them are, but the real targeted group was the Jews on that night. That was the one that was targeted, a coordinated attack. And I'll leave some sources down below for this. Some will be in Dutch because apparently I found out through my sister, which is interesting because, my sister is more leftist, and she and I, we still get along. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say, is that you don't have to always be violent to each other. But she did give me a source on YouTube for a guy who filmed a lot of the things. Now, I had to check a lot of those things if they were true that he said, and some things were easy to confirm, like that those were Maccabi supporters who took poles out of the ground. But some other things were less likely to confirm, like things he said about the nights before. So, when it comes to the actual facts, the only facts we have is that Maccabi supporters took things out of the ground. They threw things at police because they felt cornered. And that a pro-Palestinian taxi driver was beaten up. That's a fact that we can prove. And that the pro-Palestinians ended up making a coordinated attack against the Jews. And yeah, that's basically the way it went that night. And again, this kind of makes you also ask the question, why did our government in the Netherlands not know that this was going to happen? This is a very obvious thing, right? It's just, but I think they did. And this might sound like a conspiracy theory, but I think this is true. Because, think about it this way. Geert Wilders is a man that wants to get rid of Islam, the same way that I do. And what he can do with situations like this is go, hey, look, they're doing it. They're being bad. So if you create the perfect situation to get a response from the enemy, whilst you seem like the innocent person, because whether you are or not, it doesn't matter. The truth doesn't matter in war. Only victory does, basically. That's the way that war works. So, I care about the truth, personally, of course. But that doesn't change that war isn't about truth. War is always about winning. And let's be honest, the Jews won this battle. The Jews won, even though they were attacked and they had to evacuate home. They actually won because they got the media to fully engage with their story, even leaving out a lot of the parts that I mentioned. And I've always been an Israel supporter. I still am. But we do need to get our facts straight, I think. So that's what happened. Thank you for watching. Leave your thoughts below in the comments. And leave a like, and all hail to the rebel.